Hello, everyone. It's Kate Stillman with Yoga Healer Podcast, and I'm here with Emily Cole, and we're going to talk about your personal manifesto and why you want one. Emily, her coaching company is Wild Within Coaching, and you came to the Mexico live event, and one of the things that came up, because live events with me are always predictable in the sense of you come with a challenge, you go through a process that leads to a breakthrough, and you leave with a plan. But I never really know what's going to happen and how it's going to come about, right? Because they're all individual and unique. And one of the things that came out when we were talking was like, oh, the work of a manifesto, that a manifesto would be super helpful to you. And so then I remember you went off on the hunt of like, how do I write a personal manifesto? And you came back the next day, because we have multi-day events for a reason. You came back and you had a whole bunch of questions about manifesto. And then you published this awesome blog post on yogahealthcoaching.com, personal manifesto. And we'll put the link to that in the chat and in the show notes, because it's awesome. So what happened when this whole manifesto thing came about?
Yeah, I think like going into the retreat, which was kind of like a last minute, like I was like, oh, that won't happen. And then it's like, oh, this could happen. It was happening. And I was like, okay, well, if we're making this happen and we're investing in this, we're going to be in this place. Like what makes it worth our time, worth our effort and everything. I was like, I really need to figure stuff. Like I need a structure. And it's kind of one of these almost like etheric or wishy-washy, like, what am I doing structures? Like, what is Wild Within Coaching? What am I? Was this chapter? It's so funny kind of how
you had already been coaching with us for a year and running your pilot group and enrolling people, and you were at that point being a nomad, right? Yeah. Where you had been able to coach from, I believe you're in Mexico at the time, go Mexico.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So now you had like your next level questions of like, these things are working and where is this going and who do I need to become next? Something like that.
Yeah. And it's, we talk about that idea of like throwing spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. And I was like, okay, I need to collect the parts that are sticking, because we're just doing a lot of experimenting and I don't know yet. I like a lot of things. So that came up. It's like interesting how it's like that was the answer to the question I was asking of like, how do I channel this into something more specific? And I think the piece that I was really missing was like to look at the negative or to get mad. And that's why I put it in the blog post, because I can say, I want all these things. Like I want to travel and I want home and I want to coach and I want to be on trip. That's not very helpful to say you want to do everything. And it's not very discerning either. But be like, what are you mad about? Like, what is frustrating you in the world? And to use that into something that's like a guiding principle or something, to be like, this makes me mad, therefore that means I believe in this thing. Like I want the opposite. So I think that's really what kind of geared in to the manifesto, where it's some of these things where I'm like, yeah, that sounds great, but how? And then you finally kind of come to this position where you're like, okay, I'm really invested in how, and I'm going to show up tomorrow morning, day 2 or 3, whatever it was in Mexico at that point, of like, I'm going to have an answer. Like not having answers is no longer acceptable. Saying, I don't know how to have a manifesto, I don't know what I want, is just not going to work anymore. So it's time to just start like write things down, and to agree to publish it is like, okay, write things down that are good enough, you'll put your name on it, and it's okay if you come back, but you need to start with publishing something almost.
Yeah.
And then
so let me back us up a little bit for people listening who are like, what's the point of a manifesto, and why is it useful to have a manifesto? And I want to back up in this process, because to me it's like, what do you stand for? When I interviewed Peter Block on communities, and that's on the podcast, one of the core things in his work, and he's dedicated his whole life work to like activating communities, like what are we missing when we're just consumers, we're not citizens, and we're not community members. And he's like, to become part of a community, you have to decide what you give a shit about, right? And like what you get angry about or what you get mad about, it's you get mad for a reason, right? Because you see a different potential, that like something should be different. something should change, right? And something shouldn't, maybe there's an injustice, maybe there's a lack of consciousness, maybe you see a potentiality that hasn't yet been manifested or explored. And so noticing, like, what do you really actually care about? And then from care goes to conviction. Like, what do you have a conviction about? And from conviction, you can see how deep it goes with, like, how much does it piss you off when you see something that's antithetical to that conviction, right? Okay, good. So from there, because what we're trying to do is really drill down to, like, where does my life force go in this next chapter of my life? Like, how am I going to direct my life force, my potential, my prana, my energy, my purpose, my impact? How am I going to direct impact in the next quarter of my life? Well, I've got to get down to, like, what do I actually care about? More than I care about everything else. And that's what gets us into the realm of, like, okay, now we're on the drawing board of manifesto.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think.
So what happened in the process? So, like, go ahead.
So, like, one of the things that really struck too when I was researching was what comes up, Google Manifesto on the internet, was like that it's based in a political platform. Like, that would draw directly in line to votes. People say yes or no to whatever you're standing for. And for us, and like YHC, it's like, I stand for this type of health, and people are like, yes. And then they give you money, and then you get to keep living your dharma in the way that you were. And I think that this manifesto kind of pivot or chapter really went in line with that of, I was trying to do the money work and dig around in money issues and stuff until it becomes like, okay, it's not happening, but, like, I don't have time to be worried about money if I'm, like, there's a cost to that I'm not able to live my purpose in the way that I want. I need to get clear on what I stand for so people can say yes or no, do they want to give me money to do that thing? And it's, we talk about niching and getting specific, and if you're trying to help everyone, you're kind of helping no one. But being willing almost to be said no to is kind of in the same of that kind of negative emotion or whatever that's so helpful of, like, great, I'm going to say no to you, you're going to say no to me, but in that, like, the yeses kind of come in an easier way, in a clearer way, I guess, is part of it.
So knowing what you stand for. So this is a huge part of it, of, like, knowing what you're going to put a flag in the sand. Right.
Yeah. And then it's okay if someone's like, no, you're like, that's cool, because I care about my belief structure more than I care about one person saying no to me. Like, I care about being on this path more than I care about people pleasing or making everyone happy. If that's not that is your personal manifesto, if that's what you're trying to do. So then if you're putting a flag in the sand, like, people are going to be yes or no. Like, it makes a clear distinction.
Exactly. So, like, an example of this is, like, I believe, and the I believe statements are really important with manifestos because they're allowing everybody to have their own beliefs, right? And if our beliefs are based on theories that we've made up of our experiences, then, like, people's beliefs are going to be different because everyone has different experiences, different childhoods, different schooling, different work experience, different life experience, different relationships, and all that. So people are going to have different beliefs. So when we're clear about our beliefs, so, like, one of my beliefs is around purpose and meaning. Like, I believe a life driven by purpose is more meaningful, right? That's, like, it's a belief, right, that I have. Someone might be like, it doesn't fucking matter, right? So at that point, especially in a business, right, now I know that, like, okay, this is not someone who I'm going to work with in my business, because that belief is too deeply different, right, for us to be of use or value to each other. I'm not going to try to convince them that their life should be purposeful or meaningful. I mean, unless I'm, like, on a chairlift ride or something, and just, like, like, we're stuck in a container together for a certain period of time, and I want to have an interesting conversation and find out more about their beliefs on this, because mine are so different. I can maybe do it if I can do it from a place of curiosity, not convincing, then, like, fine. But, like, it's clearly not a fit for the business. And I think the more we understand our manifestos, or what exactly are beliefs that we care about, that we deeply care about, it can serve as a guiding light for the direction in the next chapter of our life.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think too, like, it's kind of like we all have one. You know, if you say I don't believe in purpose-driven life, it's like, well, yes, you do. Like your life is driven by some purpose. You're just not it's not important enough to you to articulate. You still have a purpose. If you're getting out of bed in the morning, you have a purpose. If you're staying in bed, your purpose is probably comfort over all other things. So then I think about these ideas around, you know, like future you and intention and being able to cultivate the life we want to live. If we can write it down and articulate it and speak it and publish it, we then can like, oh, what's the trajectory of being in this belief structure? And then we say, oh, that's actually not on the road to where I want to go. You know, I think about too, I've been looking a lot at the space element of like, well, we all live in a house. It's just like, did you intentionally fill your house with stuff that's pulling you forward or not? If we're not articulating and like working on our manifesto, it's kind of like just living in our parents' basement, or, you know, it's just living in whatever we've been given rather than like, I want to build this house the way that's going to support whatever I feel most called to. We get to do the same thing with our manifesto. It has that power. And then as we're coming up against things like, you know, I think about in the next season, kind of when I see these roads and I'll be like, it's not quite sitting right. Why? Oh, because I believe in this thing. That's why this doesn't.
So now you're going back to your
make
manifesto
sense.
and you're saying, where does this choice or decision, or where is this situation, where does it sitting in the manifesto? And you're looking for the rub, like something's out of alignment. So now you can use the manifesto, your codified beliefs on what is worth caring about, to check and balance decision making. Fair?
Yeah. Yeah, and even to clarify, sometimes it's like a refinement process. If I say I believe this thing, and then the action I want to take is something different, I'm like, okay, now there's a competition. So what in this is so much more appealing than what I wrote down 3 months ago? Because maybe I was wrong. I was in a different
Refinement.
mindset. So now I get to, like, I'm clear because I wrote that thing down and I recognize the rub. Then
Yeah.
if I was just following my heart the best I could or making the most rational decision, you get to like have contrast in a way that leads to more clarity.
Yes. Because otherwise, what can happen in a life is we can repeat the same pattern, right? Is we can become quite patterned. So this idea, should the manifesto evolve? And other people have done, I mean, we've done this around like, what are your values? So values and beliefs. Beliefs are reflecting values, or values are reflecting beliefs. I would say there's like a lot of merging in there. And one of the ways that this has come up, and when we did this with our family's values, like years ago, like one of our values was, and I'll tie it into belief and manifesto in a second, but the value was like, we enjoy our time together and apart. And part of the reason we had this value was based on other people in our lives, you know, giving us, you know, asking us questions about how we were using our time together and apart. Because Winston and I are not always together. Like, we also are apart. Indy's sometimes with us. She's sometimes with one of us. She's sometimes with a grandparent. Like, we're fairly, you know, freedom lifestyle driven. And so it was something that had created a rub. And I looked for that around creating values and manifesto. So what was our belief? Well, our belief behind that value was that we believe that we actually grow more in liminal spaces. And part of liminal spaces is mixing up the family structure. So if we're not apart as much, we're not all going to grow together as much. So that was the belief, right? So then, you know, things come up like, I'm taking Indy out of school to go to Lisbon because we decided that that was like a good investment of her and my time together. It's happening auspiciously at a really good time. Winston's hiring and expanding his business, so he'll have more focused time without the two of us hanging around, you know, distracting him from his growth path at that time, right? And so now there's a belief, a manifesto belief that's like, I believe we're all better off when we mix it up, when we mix up who's with who when. So now if that's a belief, if we're not doing that, say we're all together all the time, going vacations together, doing day in and day out together, and we're not mixing it up enough, I read my manifesto and it's like, wait, the rub is like we've gotten too lax We're not acting this out. Our actions aren't in alignment with our belief, which is based on something that we value. So now I can really use that to solve problems.
Yeah, and I think if you act it out and it doesn't work, someone is like, you weren't here to support me. Okay, no, we agreed on running this experiment together.
Yeah.
So now we get to go back and rewrite the rules together. Like, no one's at
Yeah.
fault here. This was,
Yeah.
and same for ourselves of like, why it kind of grounds the why. Well, why did I make this choice? Oh, because I was acting out this belief system that I can identify. Okay, well, now I get to re-articulate my belief system and guide myself in the future in a more structured way, in a more clear way. Yeah, in a way of like almost bringing it full circle rather than, again, just kind of like, I think I remember that this worked. Last time our memories are pretty bad. I think I like this. I do a lot of tripping and like wilderness tripping, and you end in a much different place than you started. And so if you're like, oh, I like going on these trips because we came away with all these great memories, and you get out there on day one and you're like, this is terrible. Why did I do this again? Oh, because I know that the ending is going to be in a different spot. And I agreed to start and not make decisions about if I'm doing this again until we get at least halfway through and see where this is going.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and that's a really good point. So, because one of your beliefs is, I believe structure brings ease. This is something we talk a lot about in our coaching courses, about structure precedes evolution. I believe structure brings ease. So when you write down something, it's like the structure of going on the trip will create these great memories later on, right? But you have to do the trip. Like, you have to do the hard things. And some people have something in a manifesto around beliefs around, like, I believe doing hard things. Like, I believe in positive stressors, in the short term. Things that make me uncomfortable in the short term make me grow in the long term. And then we can use the manifesto to guide, like, how am I doing? Like self-assessment, right?
Mm-hmm. And I think now where it's gaining some traction is I've thought a lot about this idea of, a bigger vision and a 3-year plan, and how I haven't had one ever, other than like, I'm starting university and I plan to graduate in 4 years, but I'm not attached to it unless something better comes up, is like the closest thing to like a long-term plan. And it ended much different than it started. But this idea of like, now I find myself, where I've got some big choices to make about the summer season and about guiding and coaching and a program, and where I want that all to be in 3 years or whatever, multiple years. And it's so much easier to look at like, okay, there's kind of these two paths, and this time is invested in different ways, and it's going to lead to different outcomes based on what I believe to be the most important. And one of those beliefs coming up is like around expansion and scalability. If I choose this type of work, it's only ever going to lead in the way that our society views, say, social work. It's going to cap out at this dollar value. And the stress per dollar is like, it's a lot of stress for not making too much money. If I go this route, it's meaning that there's room to expand. And it means that I don't live that old chapter anymore. Even though I like it, my purpose may expand more on this side. Okay, I don't know if I've ever looked at it before. I've been like, that looks shiny. What a cool trip. You're offering me 3 weeks on a new river. Yes, yesterday. And so it's much easier to like, I've been diving a lot more into the master of you stuff, and I've read the book a few times, struggled with it, of like articulating and re-articulating my past. But now I can start to pull out the nuggets of like, what part of the past is important in this current context versus just, here's a bunch of cool stories, emotional things, highs and lows. Let's go pick out the parts that are actually have to do. Let's isolate this value and see how we articulate it better. Okay, where did we live or not live that value in the past? Okay, where is it going in the future into that 3 year, 5 or 10 year plan, or 1 year, whatever, versus just taking the whole big thing and trying to look at the whole future, and it's like overwhelming. And so in that, structure creates freedom of, I'm going to look at this one part, and that's going to be my structure in making a plan going forward.
Yeah. I mean, it's such an interesting thing in the, especially in the world of of, you know, manifestation or law of attraction, or in this sort of like yoga-y new age world where there's not an understanding that structure precedes evolution. Like there's maybe even an antithetical to that of like, just like, you know, believe in it enough and it'll manifest. And it's, and like, yes, it's like, to me, that's like a yes, and because we have to be willing to take action, even in, you know, those who are in law of attraction. It's like something shows up and you have to act. And usually the action is the hardest thing to do. And sometimes that feels out of alignment because it's not easy. There's no ease in an action that makes you uncomfortable. I mean, just by definition. And things that are uncomfortable are things we haven't done before, almost by definition. Right? And so it's like, how do I do the hard thing that presents itself that is in alignment? Right?
Yeah.
And then it's
Yeah.
like,
And if, like, of course it's out of alignment because you're aligned onto a trajectory that you're trying to pivot now.
right.
Like that. Yes.
Yes.
It's going to, like, it's the most, you know, physicsy, science, math, whatever, like, picture that we could draw of being like, it's not going to feel in alignment at that point if you're trying to do something different. If your belief is growth and expansion and evolution, by definition, it's going to feel foreign and out of alignment and off track or something like that. And to have some set of rules that's maybe open to trying that, or open to knowing, like, some way to discern, is this off the track in the right direction, or, you know, am I stretching myself? How do I know? These are all questions that can be so big and overwhelming, and unless you've got some, I think it goes hand in hand with these, like, metrics that we create, like, what's your definition of success? What's this? And a manifesto, or, you know, a value structure can lead into, like, well, it is successful because I acted out my manifesto in this situation, and now I get to come back. Like, that could be your gauge of success. I acted it out and now I get to refine it, and now I'm a step forward. I'm a step clearer. I'm a step more towards being able to insource because I know more what my truth is than outsourcing towards whatever somebody else told me I should be doing.
Yeah, I love this. I mean, you know, part of it, it's interesting because I've been at events the last couple of weeks, in really different events with really different crowds of people at very different incomes, right? Like night and day. So I was at the National Ayurvedic Medicine Association conference, and then I was at the Consumer Health Summit, and they were both business oriented in a way. Like one was career oriented to Ayurveda, the other was career oriented to health oriented businesses, whether they're apps or supplements or coaching companies or doctors and platforms. So what was so fascinating is like the level of, like, say my belief is I go to events to build relationships and new opportunities. But say another belief of mine is around, like, the real fruit is in the follow through. It's a very common belief in sales, and it's well proven, right? So it's a belief. Beliefs are based on theories, which are based on experiences. This one is backed on a lot of data, like follow up is really, really important, right? So from either of these experiences, it's like, if I'm going to act out the belief on how fruitful going to events is, I have to be willing to then put in the sweat equity of the follow through, or have my team devote resources to that. Right? But often, and again, that's the structure that creates ease. So again, with these convictions that we have, that we are like, wait, this is something I've learned. I want to codify it. I want to turn it into a code, a belief code, because I want to help myself act out the stuff that's hard to do. It's easy to go to events. It's hard. It's hard to build the relationships on the follow through side. Right? For a lot of us, it's like that takes diligence, that takes tracking, that takes attention. There's potential rejection in there too, right? So there's, like, for a lot of people, there's a lot of reason to just, like, go to events or go do the things, but not do the follow up, not have the structure in place for what will actually bear the fruit.
Yeah, and then you can almost bury yourself in, well, now I went to so many events, I can't possibly do all this follow up. So now I'm even further away from that value. Because I just totally set myself up by going full send on this one value that is really fun and easy. I love going to events.
Yeah, yeah.
Or if you're the opposite, you could talk to people on the phone following up all day, but you don't really like in person. You can't do that easy thing without going, you can't take one without the other. And so in my brain, I'd put those, that's one belief. I believe in going to events and doing the follow through, and like, we only do the two. We only get to say yes to the one if we can do yes to the
If
other.
we can do the other. Yeah.
Those go on one line now of the manifesto.
Of the manifesto. Yes. And you guys listening, like, this to me is where it's so important you want to use your manifesto to solve problems in your future based on what you've learned in your past. So based on your past experiences, you're creating theories, you're codifying them into beliefs, and you're using those beliefs to make future decisions. So when you write down your beliefs, I believe this, it's so that you can, for this particular thing, I believe events are great if I'm willing to put in the follow through to build the relationships, right? Now that's a belief based on experiences. Now, it's usually at the level of conviction, again, it has to be something that you give a shit about. Like, that's rule number one. And it has to be something that you want to change, that you want to see manifest. So if I go back to the family belief here of I believe, or we value our time together and apart, I have to act that out. Now that might mean that as Indy gets older, that we mix it up even more for longer periods of time. Like we bring in X factors that make that even more interesting to test how true is that. And if I go to the events thing, if we take the business example and going to events, if I'm thinking that's like a good strategy to grow impact, right? I might get to a point where I can really only go to 6 events a year in order to build relationship and follow through. Or for some of you, it might be 2 events a year. For some of you, it might be 12 events a year. But all of a sudden, then I can get even more specific with how that shows up.
Yeah.
So what surprised you the most in your convictions or your beliefs?
In the actual.
Like what you actually uncovered
beliefs.
was at a core.
Yeah. Let me just pull them up if I can quickly. And I had them very close. Maybe one of the easier answers is oh,
I can share a screen too.
Sure. Yeah. If you can do that, that's awesome. How easy it was to, what would you say? To cut some out, or that I was saying the same things, because what deterred me originally from things like this and feeling like I could do them and do a good job was I believe in everything. My list is going to go on forever and ever and ever. And then at some point it was kind of why don't you pick 10? If you have all the priorities, you have none. So pick a number. 10 is nice if it's on a page, or I had a notebook I was working on. It has to fit on this page in my normal writing. So then you start to well, these are saying the same thing. Well, this one doesn't belong with that one, or, I could use some of these things are maybe most relevant to me. This idea of deep work was from a book from the book Deep Work by Cal Newport. So rather than writing down every one of his principles, it's I believe in these couple principles. I know what that means.
So it's I believe in deep work, the focus question, and being unavailable. So this is a huge part of Cal Newport's work of do less, do better, know why.
Yeah.
And so what's good about that, right, is say in your life, you're things aren't on track. You read your manifesto, what pops out of you is I'm not acting out the belief of deep work.
Yeah.
I don't have focus blocks.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not actually doing the deep, I'm just doing the light social media, the blah, blah, blah work, not the deep work. And then you can see it, right? It pops out.
Yeah. And you think about it's okay, this is the result of the actions I've taken in the last week, 2 weeks, whatever. Okay, so what actual actions? Oh, I'm not going to bed early enough. Oh, I'm not getting up early. I might have all the time blocks in the world, but I'm not well rested. I'm not in a space that's allowing this. I'm not in a place, it's guiding where I want to live in the future of the mountains are a lot easier to be physically active. There's so many fun ways to get out and moving. And I find myself
Yeah.
on the
I
prairies,
mean,
which I
you
also
can
love,
more
but
or
I'm
less
like,
make a life out of
oh.
just being in shape if you live in a mountain town.
And I know that I focus better, I sleep better, all these things. And, you know, other options I have, it's like, oh, I don't feel like running that same gravel road again. So then I kind of waver on that. It's like, okay, well, this is a big vote towards like, it's not going to happen right this second, but it's a bigger vote towards like, in the future, you need to make it happen that you live somewhere. Like your dharma depends on you living somewhere where activity happens with ease, where there's community around that, there's excitement around that, you know, whatever, there's room to invest in that gear. That's because deep work is on my manifesto. It doesn't have to be like, I believe in owning a mountain bike, I believe in being active or whatever. It's like, the result is I want to do deep work. I may not know exactly what that deep work is yet, but I value the enjoyment of it and, you know, the productivity that comes out of it. So that's like the structure that means I'm going to make choices that align towards getting focused and depth being kind of a guiding word as well.
What do you, I mean, with that, I would say, well, isn't there always deep work? Isn't it just a question of defining of what the deep work is this week?
So my current experience, I have a small, well, it's not small. I have a kind of a day job. I would put it on their quotation. It's not actually during the day, it's during the night. It requires me to stay up late and to be like on call in the night. But it's kind of one of the easiest routes to gain some leverage in finances to be able to continue on the dream. My work is not deep right now. Like it, you know, and
Yeah.
like my level of sleep, and it's like, okay, I need to find a way out of this job. Like now I value even stronger. Like I keep thinking, I just need to go to bed early. Oh shoot, I can't go to bed early. I have to stay up late and do this thing. Like it's cool because that's what's been programmed into my brain over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And I can't act on it now. So it's
Yeah.
like, okay, now we need to start making moves to get out of there. I like, maybe the deep work is like patience and staying up at night, perhaps, if we want to say there's always deep work, but there is not a level of like deep, thoughtful, provoking work because I almost like can't stay awake for it in a way.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
totally true, but it's like, I haven't aligned my lifestyle in this current moment. It's like big picture, it's like a step forward to have a little bit more leverage in finance, but
And what I want to bring up, you guys, right now is that like this is why the manifesto is so important. Like this is how it helps so much, is because like we're zoning in on this, and as a, you know, as first of all a practitioner of deep work and as a coach, I'm like, oh no, you need to know exactly what your next 2-hour block of deep work actually is and have that on the calendar if it's on your manifesto, right? So and it's not to like, it's just because manifestos help us all up our game. So for me, like I have massive chunks of deep work that need to happen before I go to Europe, like massive chunks of of being unavailable. I love this, of like being unavailable to everything except for the deep work that's focusing attention. So even with the things that we have to put off, like there's still the sense of like, it's got to be, to me, it's got to get on the calendar, even if it's not for 2 weeks, you know, but there's a 2-hour block so that we're in integrity with the manifesto. And if we can't be in integrity with the manifesto, then it's like, what changes? Is it the manifesto, or is it something in the life so that we can live the manifesto? And then that's the right question to ask.
yes, yeah,
Too, right?
You know, like I mentioned, oh, I got to get out of this job. Okay, when are you? There is a date on the calendar. I have my last shifts booked on the calendar.
Yeah.
So I know that this time between now and then is different than the time, you know, I'm
Yeah.
going to work that last shift and I'm going to go to bed at 8:30 until I can deep work again. You know, it's like, but
So-
yeah, that recognition of out of integrity, and then the integrity on it is to follow through. And, you know, when am I going to move to the mountain? Like, when is this going to be the priority number one? Oh, I can't do it yet because of this. Okay, when is that gonna, like, you can align the whole life path towards, I'm out of integrity in this one part of my manifesto. I think
Yeah.
this is the answer, but it's a year away. Now I can start to put all the steps in the process of this year in a way that I've never been able to. Like, where do you want to be in a year? Like a billion places. I could be on any, okay, great. Then that's where you're going to be, is a billion different choose your own adventure options.
Yeah.
And it's like something to come up against of like, how are we doing? It's a measure of, of guiding, a measure of success is guiding in a different way. That's success can be whatever, like it's the most, it doesn't have to be money, it doesn't have to be time. Sure, it can be, but it also is like success in how are you living out your values and refining and defining them in a new way on a regular basis.
Yeah. Okay, good. So we've covered the whole get mad, and we've covered expand and refine. Let's talk about publish. So I know when we were at the event in Mexico, like this publish part was important to you. Like it was important that, like, and there's a level in behavioral science of having other people know what you're doing, of like group reporting. And there's some controversy on this. I've run into some controversy on this in terms of if it's like really, really important, protect it and keep it to yourself. And then the opposite is if it's really important, like make sure everybody else knows about it so they can hold you to the standard that you're setting for yourself. And you went with the latter. I often go with the latter as well, because it does help me deliver. It does help the end, the completion part of the cycle, which can be really hard, especially for people that are like the dreamers, the visionaries, the quick starts, like people who are like, I'm going to do this, and they're telling everybody, but nothing's actually manifesting. At that point, like if it's really important, it might be better to keep it to yourself. Stuff like this with convictions, it can be really important to publish so that other people can help you be in integrity with yourself. Mm-hmm. Something like that. So why was it important for you to publish?
I think it mostly was at the time, like, it was about having an end date, because I was like, oh, manifesto, that's a good idea. I'll work on this. Like, I'll work on this on the bus when I leave, and I'll work on I'm going to this place out of service afterwards. That'll be a great place. And I was like, no, that's a terrible idea. Like, you can work on this forever, but you need to like, which is true, but like drafting forever versus refining forever are a couple very different things. So it meant like, oh, I know that if I say I'm publishing this, whatever that means, like at the time it meant I took a picture and put it on Instagram, and I read it out to the group and was like, yes, I will write, like if that's done, I'll write this blog post. But it meant that like, I know for me to put my name on that, it's going to have to be of a certain quality.
Yeah.
And I know that I'm open to it getting better. I know that that's really important because I know it's not finished. But if I say I'm going to work on this, like,
yeah,
that means nothing. Like, sure, yeah. What's the measure of success in working on this? Like,
it's the like, I'm going to get in shape, or like I'll eventually lose the weight, or I'll like
there's versus that, like, signing up for a race. Yeah, and
right.
saying I'm going to train for this race on this day.
Yes.
And I know that I would like to, there's a social pressure almost to like, I'd like to be at my best, maybe whatever that is.
Yeah.
That best is going to be better than if I just say I'm going to go run 5K by myself that weekend. Like, you may or may not, and it may or may not be very good. So even beyond, like, I was like, I don't care if anybody ever says, like, people were like encouraging. That was a really nice bonus. Those people were like, good job. They commented on it. And it was like good follow through, all these things that, like, that's helpful. But mostly it was like, oh, there's, it's like being back in university. There's an assignment due date. Like, someone's willing to, they're not even doing anything, but kind of hold me accountable to this assignment date. Sweet. Like,
yeah, that
will get it started in a much bigger way than saying I'll work on it, moving forward.
Yeah. So the deadline, the being public about it, and then some feedback. I'm curious how you see in terms of your coaching work, right? It's like, how can this be useful to you? Or how has it already been useful for Wild Within Coaching? Or how could it be useful in the future?
I think
and which conviction is most important? Which of the I believe statements is most important for that as you're seeing it now? Yeah. In terms of like what you give a shit about changing in the world.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing that keeps coming up is this, it's kind of in the name of like Wild Within. Anytime I see a problem, I'd be like, well, what can change? Because I look at all these issues going on in the world. I'm like, I can see where y'all are coming from. Like, yeah, I kind of agree with that, and I kind of agree with this, but I'm not saying the same thing. I'll be like, if you could just say your own truth, if you could stop you know, doing whatever you think is cool in the social media or whatever you think is right because of, like, go with it, like, pay attention, like, look at what is going on around you and see if that measures up, is what kind of keeps coming back. And I'm like, okay, well, it's people coming inside of, like, it's that insourcing versus outsourcing. So that's kind of the, like, what is happening, but what that looks like, kind of tying in the manifesto and business and where that is all going, is it the manifesto does that, like, my business to me. It's like, well, what is your business? What is your truth? What do you believe in?
Yeah.
And go act that out. Okay, and now, like, and let the money follow. Like, sure, we can pay attention to it, but stop. It's not on your manifesto that I want to make whatever amount of dollars. Sure, that's nice and that's a goal, but what I really want to do is do this change. And if I'm on point with that, the money is going to flow because people will be able to say yes or no to me. And there'll probably be more yeses than, like, I don't know what that is. That's a no. So yeah, I think it's insourcing overall. That's what this manifesto is hoping, or is helping to do, is insource the business so that it is me. And then that's being acted out as I work to merge the two of, like, what I love about coaching and what I love about wilderness expeditions, which are expeditionary, they're in length, which doesn't lend to weekly meetings necessarily, or weekly available calendar of, like, where do those come together? What's the point? Like, what would that allow? Oh, it allows people to come within themselves. It allows deep work. It allows, you know, focus in a way that doesn't happen. And that can also lead to a follow through of, maybe my annual class is 6 months over the winter and we always get together in the summer. Something like that. And I can run that through the manifesto and see, does that fit, and what's our first, you know, next step. And that's what I look at, you know, in the summer of, do I take this route towards doing cool trips with kids in cool places? Well, kids are not actually my, like, ideal client avatar. The guides might be, okay, well, if I do 2-day trips, even though I don't want to, I'm going to meet a lot more different guides, different adults. Okay, well, this is actually leading to the bigger picture.
Yeah.
Okay, run that through the manifesto. Does that give me freedom? Does that give me an upper? Well, kind of more deep work, because I could have 1 day a week rather than 1 day a month. You know, it's different things come up, and then there's like there's a hell yes to, like, this thing that I don't really want to do. I'm like, I want to be over there on that shiny, cool looking track of, like, multi-week trips. Like, no, but what I really want is freedom. And the freedom manifesto. Okay, well, that's actually on this day tripping community involvement philosophy, or whatever it is.
And now you know how you're going to show up and what you're going to do. To me, this is where it's really, the rubber meets the road, where you really get traction with it. It's like, am I acting it out? And then where does that change my decisions? Because what we do know is that people tend towards negative stressors, not positive stressors, which is doing the easy thing in the short term that's more comfortable, more familiar, more based on the past than based on the future, but that leads over time to a smaller life, less responsibility, less capacity, less capability. So if we really believe, like, no, I want to make a stand for potential, I want to grow, I want to impact, then it's like, okay, what are the positive stressors? Now, how do I use a manifesto to reinforce those positive stressors so that I'm stretching and growing into situations that, it's going to be uncomfortable because it's new and different, and it's chosen growth. Awesome. Any advice to anyone writing their manifesto?
Get mad first. That was my biggest takeaway. You got to get some emotion. And if you're mad about something, like, that's a perfect time. Like, what do you do when you're angry? What a great time to block some time for manifesto. It's okay. Like, you don't have to worry about, you know, like, get mad and we're like, oh, stop, like, the world's a nice place. You know, we, like, de-escalate ourselves rather than, like,
I'll go to sleep instead of get activated.
Go ahead and get mad, like, which sometimes is kind of like, I'll throw myself into the fire a little bit. I'll be like, this is okay if I open myself up to this that makes me frustrated, because I now know what the point is, that I want to do something with that frustration and channel it into, like, my greater purpose through this process of, like, writing down my beliefs that come up because of that. That's my biggest, that was my,
I love it. Like, get the emotion,
change.
like, get mad, like, what do you care about? Like, decide what you care about Like, and then feel, I love that. And then feel like the sort of the anger, or the frustration, or the sense of injustice, or the sense of whatever, lack of alignment in the world around that. Yeah.
The good is good too, but I could get excited about the good in anything. So that's not all that helpful to me to be like, what do you like? What's working well? Like, cool, we can always answer that question. That's why I give the advice around the frustration.
I mean, based on Peter Block's work with community, where he's asking these really hard questions, it has to be based on change. It has to be based on more on what's not working than what is working. So if even things are like, say you take like whatever, there's a lot of people that are upset about inflation right now and centralized banking. And so there's a whole movement in crypto against decentralized banking. And it's like, what can you know, for someone who's pissed about inflation and poor people losing out and their hard-won dollars and they can't make as much money, like if that's what's, it's like, if that's really infuriating, it's like, okay, then that can be part of a manifest. It's like, and what am I willing to take action on? And I think that other part is like, we can't just be mad. Like, we have to be also willing to dedicate our life force energy.
Yeah, and I think if you actually could get mad about that rather than read in the news and being like, oh, it says that I should care about this human rights issue, but I don't know anything about it, so I'll change my Facebook profile.
Yeah.
I hate that personally. That makes me mad. I'm gonna go, that goes on the manifesto of like, think for yourself, please. Like, I beg you, get in your own brain for once.
Yeah.
But the emotion around that versus not having the emotional connection to whatever you're virtue signaling, I guess is maybe the word for that.
Virtue signaling. Love it. All right. Thanks, Emily. That was really fun. And I'm so glad that, you know, at the Mexico event that you took charge and wrote your manifesto and published it. Yeah, huge. And for those, we have a few events coming up. One's in Lisbon, June 3rd to 5th. I cannot wait to be in real life. And then Alta in my home, July 28th to 30th. And then we'll be back in Mexico at the end of January 2023. I just blocked my condo out for that. I was like, oh, I better make sure I have a place to be. Awesome. Take care,
you and
Emily.
I could be skateboarding back to the
totally
hotel every day.
We could just camp on the beach, camp on our paddle boards.
Thanks, Kate. Thanks everybody.
Emily. Bye.